Welcome to Timeless Tales of Time. I am your host, and with me is our expert guide.
It's great to be here. Today, we're really getting into one of those fundamental human dilemmas, aren't we? Where exactly do you draw the line between, well, survival and principle?
That really is the core question, isn't it? I mean, imagine being offered everything, ultimate power, wealth, security. But there's a catch. You have to compromise that one single principle you hold most dear.
And most people, let's be honest, most people probably bend. They compromise. It's human nature, perhaps.
But today, we're diving into the story of two men, two princes actually, who were tested at the absolute highest level imaginable. And they chose principle, unbending principle, even when it meant, well, starvation.
We are indeed talking about Bo Yi and Shu Qi, these legendary brothers from the very end of the Shang dynasty. Their story, it's much more than just some historical anecdote.
It feels like the ultimate philosophical test case.
Exactly. They face these monumental choices, and they chose death, basically, because the path to power, even to peace, violated their core beliefs about what was right, about righteousness.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack every single layer of this incredible story. We'll look at the immense weight of that first decision they made, renouncing a throne.
And then analyze their defiant protest against a revolutionary king, King Wu.
And then, crucially, we need to review the really fierce historical debates that have raged about them ever since. Were they heroes, or were they, just completely impractical idealists?
Yeah, were they admirable or just stubborn to the point of folly? We'll see why their final decision, that refusal to eat the grain of a new dynasty, remains such a powerful mirror. It reflects our own struggles with integrity and compromise even today.
Okay, let's get into it. Right, so to really understand the gravity of their later sacrifice, we have to start at the beginning. Where did they come from? We're looking at the tail end of the Shang dynasty in a place called Guizhou.
Guizhou, yeah. It was located up in the northeast near what's now the Qinhuangdao area, and it wasn't some remote backwater.
No, the sources suggest it was actually quite culturally developed.
Definitely. Even the name itself, Guizhou, meaning gourd and bamboo, those are materials associated with writing, with scholarship. So this state had a certain standing, a legacy.
And within this state, you have these two princes, Bo Yi, the elder brother, and Shu Qi, who was the youngest, sons of the ruler, Yahweh.
And here's where the drama kicks off the father's will. For reasons we can only really guess at, he decided that the younger son, Shu Qi, should inherit the throne.
Completely bypassing the elder brother, Bo Yi.
Exactly. And that's a critical point you raised. This wasn't the standard practice.
No, it flew in the face of the tradition of disangzi jichengzi, the eldest son succession. That was the norm.
Right. So by choosing the youngest, the father essentially created this kind of constitutional dilemma. It seems rooted more in personal preference, maybe affection, than an established law or ritual.
And what's truly fascinating is how the sons dealt with this. Their reaction was, well, extreme moral correctness, wasn't it?
It really was. When the father died, Shu Qi, the one who was supposed to inherit, immediately said no. He refused the throne.
He insisted it had to go to Bo Yi.
Yes. He argued that custom ritual correctness Li dictated the elder brother should rule. He put tradition above his father's command and, obviously, above his own potential power.
So Shu Qi's prioritizing ritual propriety, but then Bo Yi also refuses.
He does. And his reasoning is just as high-minded, but from a different angle. Bo Yi argued they had to respect their father's specific final command, custom or no custom.
So for Bo Yi, following the father's express wish was the ultimate act of filial duty, shao, even if it broke with tradition.
Precisely. He seemed to see the throne itself as this potential source of conflict, something that could corrupt ritual propriety if they fought over it or didn't follow the father's last instruction.
And to make absolutely sure there was no conflict, no ambiguity, he just left.
He immediately fled the country, just removed himself entirely from the picture, made it impossible for people to try and install him against his will or against his brother.
Wow. Okay, so that's the first renunciation. But then Shu Qi sees this.
And Shu Qi, seeing his elder brother flee out of principle, felt that he couldn't then take the throne either. That would be unrighteous, Yu Shuangdi Bai. It would look like he was benefiting from his brother's noble act.
It would violate their fraternal bond, their brotherly duty.
Exactly. So, if Bo Yi's flight was driven by filial piety, honoring the father's word, Shu Qi's flight seems driven by fraternal righteousness, honoring his brother's action and their relationship.
It's like a competition in demonstrating virtue. a race to the moral high ground.
That's a great way to put it. They were so determined to avoid even the appearance of personal ambition that they both just walked away from the highest position in their state.
Incredible. So what happened to Guizhou?
Well, the state officials were left in a bind. They had no choice but to install a middle brother, someone named Ya Ping, as the next ruler. But the real legacy, of course, isn't with Ya Ping. It's with the two who left.
And the cultural significance of what they did, this double renunciation.
It perfectly highlights this fundamental tension you see throughout traditional Chinese thought. Yi, zi hibian, the distinction between righteousness, yi, and profit or self-interest, li.
Explain that distinction a bit more, yi versus li.
Sure. Li is often translated as profit, personal gain, advantage, self-interest, while yi is about moral appropriateness, what's right according to your duties, your relationships, the broader social good.
So their actions basically screamed that pursuing the throne, the ultimate li, the ultimate personal gain, had to be sacrificed because it compromised yi, moral correctness in their eyes.
Absolutely. And tied right into that is this idea of yielding or rang.
Which in this traditional view isn't weakness at all, is it?
Not at all. It's seen as the ultimate strength. The idea is that rang, yielding, allows the truly virtuous person to emerge. It prioritizes long-term social harmony and moral health over who wins right now.
They saw the throne not as a prize to be grabbed, but as this immense moral responsibility.
A burden, almost. And they believed that only by stepping back, by sacrificing their claim, could they ensure the moral foundation of their society, their family, remained intact.
It's such an incredibly high standard. I mean, to reject the ultimate prize because the path to getting it, even if indirectly, feels ethically questionable.
And that's exactly why their story echoed so powerfully through Chinese history. It set this precedent. A true gentleman, a Zhuangzi, should walk away from power rather than risk having his principles tainted by the struggle for it.
The moral choice itself becomes more important than any earthly outcome.
That's the core of this first act. It elevates principle above all else.
Okay, so they fled their homeland, renounced power. The brothers are now essentially self-exiled wanderers.
Yeah.
They need somewhere to go, right?
Wow.
Somewhere the principles might be well appreciated.
And they start hearing things, rumors reaching them about Shibo Chang, the Lord of the West. We know him better as King Wen of Zhou.
What were they hearing?
The reports were good. That he was a virtuous ruler, someone who respected the elderly, governed justly. It sounded like just the kind of place for two, aging, deeply principled former princes.
So they decide to head west, seeking refuge with this lord they believe is Ren, benevolent, righteous. But, as often happens, timing is everything.
And their timing was complicated. By the time they actually arrive in the Zhou territory, the situation had completely changed.
King Wen was dead.
King Wen had died. And his son, now King Wu, wasn't ruling passively like his father. He was doing something much more drastic.
He was on the move, leading a massive military campaign.
Exactly. A campaign to overthrow the Shang dynasty, specifically targeting the notorious tyrant, King Zhou.
And the sources make a point of describing how he was leading this army. There's a ritual element here, isn't there?
Yes, critically important. King Wu was carrying his father's spirit tablet, the Muzu. Essentially, he was leading the army symbolically as his deceased father, claiming both ancestral and divine mandate for this huge undertaking.
So for Bo Yi and Shu Qi, who just walked away from a throne precisely to uphold ritual integrity and filial piety, this must have been jarring.
Jarring is an understatement. They saw this massive war machine, led by a son carrying his father's tablet before the proper mourning was even done, and they were immediately appalled. It struck them as a profound violation of procedure, of Li.
And this is where their incredibly rigid sense of loyalty and morality just slams head-on into revolutionary necessity, into pragmatism.
Right. What happens next is one of the most audacious, almost unbelievable political protests in ancient history. Bo Yi and Shu Qi physically confronted King Wu's chariot.
They stood in the path of the army.
Yes. This famous scene is called Ku Ma Jian. It translates literally as rebuking by tapping the horse. But some accounts suggest they actually grabbed the reins.
Imagine that. Two weary, exiled old men stepping out in front of this conquering army, grabbing the reins of the commander's chariot, putting their lives on the line.
The sheer courage, or perhaps the sheer conviction, is astounding. And they didn't just stand there. They delivered these two core arguments against the whole campaign.
Arguments rooted entirely in ritual and propriety, right? Not about whether the Shang tyrant deserved overthrowing.
Exactly. Their first point: The campaign was unfilial buxiao.
Because King Wu was launching a war while his father, King Wen, was still unburied, before the mourning rituals were complete.
Precisely. For the Zhu themselves, filial piety was absolutely central to their own claim to legitimacy. So Bo Yi and Shu Qi are basically saying, you're failing your own test right from the start.
Yeah.
This is fundamentally improper.
But hang on, let's play devil's advocate. Isn't overthrowing a universally hated tyrant, potentially saving millions from cruelty, the greater good here? Doesn't the practical benefit, the utility of saving the people, outweigh the ritual violation of mourning customs?
And that is the absolute crux of the clash. For Bo Yi and Shu Qi, the means must justify the end. Always.
Process over outcome.
Entirely. They believe that if you violated these foundational principles, proper conduct, filial duty, loyalty, then any dynasty you founded, no matter how benevolent it aimed to be, would be inherently illegitimate, morally flawed from birth.
Wow. Okay, so that was the first argument, unfilial conduct. What was the second?
The second argument was that the campaign was unrighteous biren or bui. Specifically, it violated the principle of loyalty between subject and sovereign.
They argued King Wu was technically still a subject, a vassal, Chen of the Shang dynasty.
Yes, and in their view, subjects do not raise arms to kill their sovereign. Ye Chen Shi Jun. That was regicide. That was rebellion. Chaos.
Even if the sovereign is a monster.
Even then. In their incredibly strict worldview, the mandate of heaven hadn't clearly and properly transferred yet. Violence initiated by a subject against his ruler was simply wrong, regardless of the ruler's wickedness.
So what should King Wu have done, according to them? Just waited?
Essentially, yes. They seem to believe that if the Zhu were truly righteous, they should wait for the Shang dynasty to collapse under the weight of its own corruption, or for a clearer sign from heaven, not take matters into their own hands with violence.
Unsurprisingly, King Wu's followers, his generals and soldiers, were not impressed.
Not at all. They were furious. Here's this army fueled by righteous anger against a tyrant, ready to liberate the people. And these two guys are blocking the path, citing what must have sounded like obscure ritual technicalities.
They wanted them executed on the spot, presumably, for treason, obstruction?
Absolutely. It looked like direct interference. But fortunately for the brothers, the chief strategist of the Zhu army, the legendary Jiang Taigong, also known as Taigong Wang or Lu Shang, intervened.
The Grand Duke himself stepped in.
Yes. And Jiang Taigong, despite being the military mastermind, recognized something in their protest. He saw it wasn't political sabotage. It was born from genuine, albeit extreme, moral commitment.
He called them men of righteousness, Yishi.
He did. He acknowledged the purity of their stance, even while disagreeing with its practicality, and he made sure they were safely escorted away, unharmed. Their lives were spared.
That's remarkable in itself. That even the leaders of this revolution focused on war and victory could recognize and, in a way, respect the brothers' impossible moral code.
It speaks volumes, doesn't it? They were allowed to live even though their protests achieved nothing in stopping the war itself. The Zhu army marched on. But history, as you know, doesn't often bend to absolute moral principles. King Wu's campaign was, from a military perspective, a resounding success.
He defeated the Shang King Zhu. This is around 1046 BCE. The Zhu dynasty is established.
Yes, the Zhu dynasty begins, and the world, or at least the known world of China at the time, submits to this new order, which claimed to be more virtuous, more aligned with heaven's mandate.
And this is where Bo Yi and Shu Qi reach their final irrevocable sticking point.
Exactly. They could have perhaps rationalized things. They could have accepted the new reality. The tyrant was gone, a new dynasty was in place. Many former Shang officials did just that. They switched allegiance.
But not the brothers. Why not?
Because they saw the very foundation of the Zhu dynasty as tainted. It was established through actions they deemed unfilial, the improper mourning, and unrighteous, the subject attacking the sovereign.
So the process again. The means used to create the Zhu state made the state itself illegitimate in their eyes.
Fundamentally illegitimate. They viewed it as shameful, catchy. And this deep sense of shame led them to make a truly radical and ultimately self-destructive vow.
This is the famous refusal of the Zhu millet.
Precisely. They vowed they would never eat the grain, the soup, millet being the staple. They came from the lands ruled by the Zhu house. This was it, their final, absolute stand.
A way to maintain their personal moral purity, their kiji, against a world they saw as compromised?
It was the only way left for them to protest, to refuse complicity in what they considered an unjust transition of power.
But the practical implications. If you refuse the food of the ruling dynasty, where does that leave you? Especially given the understanding of sovereignty back then.
It leaves you nowhere, really. There's that old philosophical saying, under all heaven, every spot is the monarch's ground. Pushin zixia mo fei wang tu, if all the land, and therefore all the grain grown on it, belongs to the Zhu king.
Then refusing Zhu grain means refusing all food, essentially.
That was the stark reality. They made the ultimate choice for principle, which meant choosing exile, deprivation, and starvation.
So they retreated, they hid themselves away.
Yes, they went up into the mountains, specifically Shugang Mountain, Zhuyangshan, and there they tried to survive by foraging for wild edibles.
The sources mention Wei Kai.
Yes, often identified as bracken fern or fiddleheads. Wild, uncultivated plants. That was all they would permit themselves to eat. It sets this incredibly tragic, lonely scene for their final days, starving for a principle that the rest of the world had basically moved on from.
And it's in this state, isn't it, in this moment of utter isolation and approaching death, that they leave behind their most famous legacy.
Their final testament, yes. The Kai Wei Krai, the Song of Picking Ferns, or the Song of Lament, composed just before they died of starvation. And the emotional weight of this song is just immense.
Can we unpack that a bit? What does the song actually say? What are they lamenting?
Well, it starts by questioning the whole revolution, the new rulers. They lament climbing the western mountain, Shouyang, to pick ferns. They suggest King Wu merely replace one form of violence, the tyrant King Zhu, with another, his own violent rebellion, Yibao, replacing violence with violence.
So they're questioning if this method, this violent overthrow, was truly righteous in the end. Was the new order really better or just different?
Exactly. Was it just a cosmetic change achieved through improper means? Then the song grieves for the past, for the golden ages they idealized.
The times of Shen Nong, the divine farmer, Yu the great Xia dynasty founders.
Those legendary sage kings, yes. Eras where supposedly rulers gained power through virtue, through peaceful succession, not through military force and violations of ritual. They felt like those better times were gone forever, that history had abandoned those ideals.
A sense of profound historical loss.
Deep loss. And then, the most heartbreaking part is the expression of their own despair, their inevitable fate. They lament their situation, asking where they can possibly go now. They're trapped.
Trapped between the biological need to survive and their absolute need to maintain moral integrity.
Right. The famous closing lines, depending on the version and translation, are just a cry of utter desolation. Something like, the plants wither and die. Alas, let us return to death. Our fate is exhausted, our destiny so poor.
They chose death. They starved on that mountain, maintaining their principles to the bitter end.
They did. And their lives, but especially their deaths in this manner, transformed them. They went from being arguably failed political actors or protesters into becoming these timeless symbols of absolute, uncompromising moral conviction.
It really forces you, the listener, to stop and think. What value does a principle hold if upholding it demands your very life?
It's a terrifying standard to measure against, isn't it?
Okay, so their dramatic end guaranteed their story would live on, but it also kicked off centuries of really intense debate. Was this the absolute pinnacle of human virtue, or was it just the height of self-inflicted, pointless suffering?
Absolutely. And we really need to dive into both sides of this great debate. The Jibian Boy, the fierce arguments about Bo Yi and Shuqi. Let's start with the praise, the positive stance.
And the biggest endorsement, the one that really cemented their legacy, came from Confucius himself, right?
Undeniably. Confucius held them in extremely high regard. He listed them alongside other figures that he considered supremely virtuous, like Wu Taibo, who also had renounced a throne under different circumstances.
And Confucius gave that famous verdict, the line that essentially vindicates them spiritually.
Yes. They sought Ren and achieved Ren, so what regret do they have? Qi Ren de Ren, Yu He Yuan Hu.
What does that mean exactly? Sought Ren and achieved Ren?
It means their goal wasn't worldly success, power, or even long life. Their goal was perfect moral integrity, benevolence, righteousness, Ren. And by choosing starvation to uphold that Ren, they achieved their ultimate aim.
So their success wasn't measured by politics or survival, but by the perfection of their own moral character.
Exactly. In Confucius's view, they won. The reward was spiritual integrity, a victory that, for him, far surpassed any military or political success King Wu might claim.
And Confucius explicitly contrasted their enduring fame, rooted in this virtue, with the temporary wealth of powerful nobles of his own time, like Duke Jing of Qi. Their riches disappeared, but Bo Yi and Shu Qi's names live on.
Because their legacy was built on something lasting virtue, not on fleeting material gain. Then, centuries later, you get figures like Han Yu and the Tang dynasty.
The great essayist, what did he add?
Han Yu basically took Confucius's praise and turned it up to 11. He lauded their fierce, independent, uncompromising conviction, Sinda dur ziziming. He claimed their spiritual light shone brighter than the sun and moon. Their moral elevation was greater than Mount Tai.
He practically deified them, morally speaking.
Pretty much. And Han Yu made a crucial political argument, too. He insisted their extreme example was absolutely necessary for social order.
How so?
He argued that their uncompromising loyalty, their willingness to die, rather than serve an illegitimate ruler, in their eyes, served as a vital deterrent. Without their example, Han Yu claimed, you'd just have endless chaos, rebellious subjects and villains following one after another throughout history.
So their story helped shore up the feudal order. It showed that loyalty, even to the point of death, was the highest virtue.
That was certainly Han Yu's interpretation and use of their story. He needed their example. And this line of thinking cemented their status. Later, in the Ming Dynasty, the scholar Yanwu called them the teacher of 100 generations.
Praising the sheer strength of their moral character, Fenkao Yi Hijing. So, for this camp, the verdict is clear. Moral integrity is worth more than life itself.
That's the essence of the positive stance. Uncompromising virtue as the ultimate achievement.
Okay, now we absolutely have to tackle the other side. The critics, the skeptics, the people who looked at this story and saw something very different. Why were they so sharply criticized?
Well, one of the earliest and maybe most fundamental critiques comes from a completely different philosophical school, Taoism, specifically Zhuangzi.
And Zhuangzi had little patience for this kind of rigid, principled suffering, right?
None at all. For a Taoist like Zhuangzi, this obsession with strict rituals, with social propriety, with making these grand self-sacrificial gestures, it completely misses the point of just living life naturally, flowing with the Tao.
So what did he say about them?
He basically dismissed their deaths as useless martyrdom. He accused them of neglecting the fundamental duty of preserving life, bunyan benyang shoming ziye, just so they could chase after empty posthumous fame.
That's harsh. Did he really compare them to?
He did. He compared their self-inflicted starvation to the pointless sacrifice of a dog or a pig being led to slaughter. He explicitly said they weren't worthy of being called worthy scholars. The implication is stark. They mistook rigid, artificial principles for true, natural wisdom.
Wow. Okay, so that's the Taoist rejection. What about other critiques?
You also get critiques rooted more in, let's say, hedonism or just immediate practicality. Think of the great Tang Dynasty poet Li Bai.
Famous for his love of wine and freedom.
Exactly. And Li Bai looked at Bo Yi and Shu Qi starving on their mountain and basically said it achieved nothing. Zheng Wuqing. Why suffer for some abstract principle?
He preferred present happiness.
Right. He famously preferred the tangible pleasure of wine right now over what he saw as just hollow fame after you're dead and gone. He essentially asks, what good is praise from people you'll never meet if you died cold and alone? It's the ultimate dismissal of that Confucian-Machian focus on enduring reputation.
A very different perspective on what constitutes a worthwhile life.
Very different. But perhaps the most intellectually damaging critique, the one that really challenged their consistency, came later from the Song Dynasty statesman and reformer Wang Anshi.
Wang Anshi, the pragmatist, what was his argument?
He pointed out what he saw as a fundamental logical inconsistency in their actions, a kind of logical trap.
Which was?
Wang Anshi basically said, look, if Bo Yi and Shu Qi refused to serve the tyrant Shang King Zhu, presumably because he was wicked, then they must have been seeking a righteous Ren ruler.
Okay, that follows.
Now, King Wu was leading this hugely popular campaign to get rid of that very tyrant. Most people saw King Wu's cause as righteous, as liberating the people. So if Bo Yi and Shu Qi only wanted to serve the righteous, why did they refuse King Wu? Why refuse the millet of the Zhou dynasty, which was arguably the most righteous option available?
So if King Wu was righteous, refusing him makes no sense. If he wasn't righteous enough for them, then who possibly could be? Where else could they have gone?
Precisely. Wang Anshi showed that their principle was so absolute, so rigid, that it became completely impractical. It led them to reject all available options. Their moral standard essentially painted them into a corner with no way out but starvation.
It was literally a dead end, logically and physically.
A dead end. And then fast forward to the 20th century, and you get a very different kind of critique framed in the context of modern political revolution. Mao Zedong weighed in.
And given Mao's perspective, I imagine he wasn't a fan of Bo Yi's loyalty to the old order.
Not in the slightest. This is, of course, a highly politically charged interpretation. Mao directly attacked Han Yu's praise of Bo Yi. He didn't see Bo Yi as a hero of loyalty at all.
What did he see him as?
He called him a deserter, kai xiao chai tao pao, someone who basically abandoned his duty to the people by running away. Crucially, Mao viewed the Shangzu transition not as a questionable act of rebellion, but as a necessary progressive popular revolution.
The People's Liberation War of its time, led by King Wu.
That's how Mao framed it. So in his view, Bo Yi's stubborn adherence to outdated feudal principles like absolute subject to sovereign loyalty was actually counter-revolutionary. He criticized it as a form of democratic individualism that opposed the will of the people in the march of history.
So Bo Yi wasn't just wrong, he was objectively on the wrong side of history, opposing progress.
That's the essence of Mao's critique. It's the ultimate political rejection. And this clash, the individual obsessed with personal moral purity versus the perceived necessity of mass political change, makes their story just endlessly debatable and relevant.
So you have all these arguments swirling around them for centuries. Confucius praising their Ren, Han Yu seeing them as essential for orders, Zhuangzi dismissing them, Wang Anshi finding them illogical, Mao seeing them as reactionaries. It all seems to culminate in this really profound philosophical question.
It does, and that question is articulated most powerfully by the person who had to formally write their story down for the official record, the grand historian himself, Sima Qian.
In Ishiji, the records of the grand historian, he was clearly troubled by their story, wasn't he?
Deeply troubled. When he gets to their biography, he introduces what scholars now call the Great Doubt, or the Tian Daozi, when the question of heaven's way.
What is that question?
He looks at Bo Yi and Shu Qi, these paragons of virtue who starved to death for their integrity, and he asks, why? Why do good people suffer? He pairs them with another example. Confucius's favorite disciple, Yanwu, or Yan Yuan.
Who was praised constantly for his goodness, his diligence.
Yes, but who lived his entire life in grinding poverty and died tragically young. Sima Qian puts these virtuous sufferers side by side.
And contrasts them with
the wicked who prosper. He brings up the notorious example of Daozi.
a legendary bandit leader.
A monster, according to the accounts Sima Qian references. Someone who murdered innocents, supposedly ate their livers, terrorized the populace, led a huge gang of followers, and yet...
He lived a long, successful, cruel life.
Exactly. He lived to a ripe old age, fat and happy, despite his horrific crimes. So Sima Qian throws up his hands, philosophically speaking. He asks, is there a heavenly way? Is there a Tian Dao? Is there some cosmic justice that rewards good and punishes evil?
Because the evidence seems to point the other way. The righteous starve, the wicked thrive. It's the ancient Chinese formulation of the problem of evil, essentially.
It really is. And Sima Qian seems genuinely stumped. He can't reconcile the suffering of Bo Yi and Yan Hui with the prosperity of Daozi. He concludes that the heavenly way, if it even exists, is utterly inscrutable, opaque, unpredictable. It certainly doesn't seem to guarantee earthly rewards for virtue.
That's a pretty bleak assessment from the grand historian, a
Yeah.
profound existential doubt at the heart of their story.
It is. And it's this doubt, this questioning of cosmic justice, that gives their story such enduring philosophical weight.
But Sima Qian doesn't just leave it there, does he? He finds some kind of resolution, maybe not a perfect one, but a way to give their lives meaning beyond the tragedy.
He does find a path forward, a kind of stoic consolation. It shifts the focus from earthly rewards in this life to something else.
To what they leave behind.
Exactly. His conclusion is powerful. If virtue cannot guarantee you happiness or long life or wealth in this world, it can guarantee you something else. A lasting name. Enduring fame.
He quotes that idea. The gentleman fears his name not being recorded after death.
Right. So for Sima Qian, the ultimate reward for Bo Yi and Shu Qi wasn't food or power. It was their enduring reputation. Because they lived and died according to such high principles, their names became eternally synonymous with righteousness, integrity, Ren.
And that fame was cemented, of course, by Confucius's high praise. Their Ren became their legacy, their form of immortality.
That's the resolution Sima Qian lands on. Their virtue earned them a place in history, a name that would be remembered and respected long after the prosperous wicked were forgotten or reviled.
And their legacy wasn't just confined to philosophy and history books, was it? There's an artistic dimension, too.
Yes, interestingly, Bo Yi is traditionally considered a master of the guini, that ancient Chinese zither.
The scholar's instrument.
Precisely. And a specific melody, Bo Yi Cao, Bo Yi's melody, or Bo Yi's principle, is said to have survived. It's seen as reflecting that spirit of lofty principle, of virtuous reclusion, and it even contributed to the formation of a specific regional school of kin playing, the Yanshan kin school.
So the very sound of their virtue, in a way, has echoed down through the millennia.
It's a nice thought, isn't it, that their integrity resonated not just in words, but in music, too.
Okay, let's bring this right up to the present day. We've talked about their choices, the debates, the legacy. What's the modern equivalent of refusing the zoo millet? How does this ancient story connect to us now?
That's really the essential takeaway, I think. That act, refusing the grain, it symbolizes rejecting a system, an opportunity, a reward, because you view it as fundamentally compromised or corrupt, even if accepting it would make your life much easier, much more comfortable.
So it's about drawing a line based on personal ethics.
Exactly. It's a timeless struggle, isn't it? That fight for professional integrity, for moral clarity.
And you can see echoes of it everywhere if you look.
Definitely. It might be the scientist refusing funding from a source they deem unethical, or a lawyer choosing not to take a high-paying client whose case violates their conscience.
Or maybe someone leaving a lucrative job because they fundamentally disagree with the company's mission or practices, the whistleblower who sacrifices their career.
All of these are modern versions, perhaps less extreme, of refusing the millet. It's about choosing principle over profit, integrity over comfort, even when it comes at a significant personal cost.
Bo Yu and Shu Qi took it to the absolute ultimate extreme, of course, death by starvation.
They did.
Yeah.
But their story serves as this incredibly powerful archetype. It forces us to think about and maybe define our own millet. What's the line we won't cross? What compromises are unacceptable to us?
Their sacrifice gives us a framework, a language, to talk about the real cost of maintaining moral clarity in a complex world.
And it suggests that while the immediate reward might be suffering or loss, the long-term reward, like C. McKeon suggested, might be the integrity of your own life, the legacy you leave, the name you make for yourself.
It's a stark reminder that integrity often demands a high price, but perhaps that record of virtue is the most lasting thing we can achieve in a world where justice isn't always apparent.
And it leaves us all with that final, deeply provocative thought, doesn't it? If your core principles truly required you to starve, could you? Would you?
A challenging question to end on. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Timeless Tales of Time. In the next episode, we will talk about another figure from history. Stay tuned.
If you enjoy our show, please feel free to subscribe and share it. We'll see you next time.